Get all the candidates.
Their budget goes up very tightly. Just lovely. I don't know either. Yeah, absolutely.
So, recognizing that all the candidates generously gave us some time here today to answer some questions and address what we've been talking about the last couple days, which is building a green economy in Northern Ontario. I'd like to get us started here, and I know you're not here to hear from me, you're here to hear from our candidates for Thunder Bay Superior North. So I'd just like to briefly explain how this candidates panel will work. We've had some questions that have been submitted by people who've been attending our forum yesterday and today, and I will read those questions. But first I'd like to give each of our candidates here a chance to introduce themselves and to address the topic of the green economy in whatever way they'd like. And because we all know that you're all wonderful speakers and have a lot to say, we do have to limit the amount of time that each of you have. So if you could take 3 minutes to introduce yourself, and we'll start on my end with Steve here, and then once you've done so, we'll get into questions, and I'll let you know if you're a little lengthy with your words here. So let's get started, Steve.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to Environment North and to everyone who's come. This is a big topic, greening our economy. Let me start a little bit with my own kind of voyage in that area. As a young man, I saw that we had real challenges in terms of how we related to each other, how we related to our economy, and how we related to our environment. And 40 years ago, that led me to trying to develop a relationship most close to the land. I live in Kaministiquia. I've lived there for 40 years. And I'm an organic gardener. And what I learned, through my early years was that the choices we have to make every day make a difference in terms of the whole world. And that we need to be conscious of that and thinking about that as we make choices on all aspects of our life. I chose to be an organic gardener because I wanted us to have a healthy planet. I wanted my children to be healthy. I wanted to ensure that they had the best food available so that they could grow to be strong, healthy people and be engaged in their community. And I also wanted to try to give them that opportunity to have a close relationship with nature. We're really lucky here because we've got our natural environment so close to us. But that's not enough. Sometimes we're a society of, it seems like, immediate gratification. We need to get that right now. And when you think about food as an example, you can eat a sweet pea and, isn't that great? But what does it take to have that sweet pea there? And so if we can introduce our folks, hopefully in a young age, but as we get older, to the process of what it takes to create that sweet pea, we all benefit. So another thing, of course, you learn as you live with the land is it's a long-term relationship, and that we need to ensure we have long-term planning in terms of where we go into the future. If we think that we can deal with nature as a one-off, we'll do this month and everything will be better, well, we've got a lot of learning to do. So it's about engaging in the long term, it's about a life process, and it's one that we need to integrate into our economic development. I think there's all kinds of opportunities for us to do that, but the first is about engagement. It's about the folks in this room being engaged in the process of what is the future of our community, what is the future of our economy. We need people who are keen on this to drive it to make a change. You know, we've got a number of good things that have happened in our area. You know, the stuff that happened around the food security network got a lot of people engaged, and you can see in our city a number of good things. You know, the buy local, the eat local, the community gardens. All these are concrete steps. How much? 20 seconds. Oh, I've only gotten through 2 of my 8 things. So let me just end that as we move forward, the NDP says we're going to have a process of engaging people on a number of levels in determining what our future is like as we move into the economic development of our region. And I want you all to be there at the table. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael Gravelle.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks to everybody for being here. And this is a very important discussion, and one that I'm glad we have an opportunity to at least have a little bit of opportunity to go through today. And you know what? I agree with just about everything that Steve has said, and may I say particularly related to the integration of our economy in terms of the opportunities that we see for greening the economy. I don't think anybody at this table, or certainly no one in this room, is going to argue about how important it is for us to move towards a cleaner, greener environment in terms of both our short-term and our long-term health. And the challenge, I think, as for many people, has been to see how we can do that, while indeed we also take advantage of some of the things that can happen from an economic point of view. Certainly, I think government has a very significant role to play. And I do believe that our government has taken a very, very strong and aggressive approach to recognizing the opportunities that are there. I missed the discussion yesterday, Peter, related to forestry and some of the opportunities that are there. And I wish I could have been here, but we all obviously are very busy. But you know, certainly we are excited about the fact that, for one thing, you know, we've got the Center for Research and Innovation in the Bioeconomy, $25 million commitment our government made to help commercialize technologies that work towards a cleaner, greener future. Certainly in our wood supply competition, hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about some of these in more detail, a little bit more detail later. One of the allocations went to Rentec Fuels. You may not, Olympiad Liquid Fuels. This is a company that will be using basically development of new renewable jet fuel. You may not have heard about this. But it was part of our effort to make our wood supply competition part of the transformation of the forestry industry. This renewable jet fuel, the company is working with a major commercial airline carrier, and indeed the prospects are that about 20% of the jet fuel that's being used flying around the world could come from this particular source, which obviously would reduce the carbon footprint by a significant amount. So I think that's an important role to play. Also, many of our other projects relate to bioenergy projects from many of the major companies. And for those who say there's not an economy developing around this, I'm just wrong. Our commitment to the Green Energy Act, particularly for wind power and solar, we are seeing some astonishing results. Most of you certainly do know about the Greenwich Wind Energy Project in Dorian. A real success. I don't think there's any controversy attached to that at all. That is remarkable in terms of providing a significant backup for our base load power needs, and also opportunities for the future as well. But that clean renewable power is significant, and may I say, from an economic point of view, what it's doing is it's about a $275 million project. It's providing significant work, but also significant contracts to scores of local companies that are providing the materials for that, so that as well. Solar Logic in Thunder, am I through? Solar Logic in Thunder Bay, installing solar panels, 60 jobs, putting up about 100 panels so far. There's many others, Terrace Bay Solar, building the wind turbine wings in Sault Ste. Marie. So, listen, we feel very committed to the greening of the economy. We think there's many ways we can move forward, and we feel the government has a very significant role. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scott Kyle.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here today and for having me and us. And thank you to my colleagues for participating in this as well. There have been a number of venues, as has been mentioned, from food security to broader issues and then an educational debate. And I'm trying to articulate as best I can as to how these things are related, and hopefully we can get into some of that here today. I guess I sit before you today. I was just having a discussion with a gentleman, and I was kind of, he sort of encouraged me in a different direction, because I was saying that I'm not really trying to be a politician. I'm not really striving to be a politician up here. And I'm kind of hitchhiking on the coattails of a wise thing that was given to me years ago, and a friend of mine had said, a retired teacher had said, you know, Scott, our democracy is not going to change. The state of it's not going to change until the people from the community go and get a person and say, hey, we want you in office, rather than some person coming up out of the middle of nowhere and saying, I want to run for office. But I've quoted Jack Layton a number of times in saying that, you know, he said just before his deathbed, he said, you know, this is about a full-on restoration of social democracy. Because I'm very concerned about, I'm as concerned about the state of our democracy as I am about the so-called greening of our economy, and green this and green that, and this black bag is green. And I'd like to elevate the dialogue up to a level where we can understand our bodily, psychic, and soul connection with the earth and with our environment. I grew up hunting and fishing in this area. I'm from a small pulp and paper town west of here, Fort Francis. Lived here all my life. And so I'm familiar with pulp and paper towns and sort of one-horse towns as far as industry goes. I'm tired, frankly, of all the resource extraction that happens in the north and gets sent away. And there were days in the 80s when we could go down and cut open the lumber from the shrink wrap down south of the border and get it for cheaper than we could get it locally. And this is very much on target for I think what we're about here today. We need to own ourselves here in Northwestern Ontario. We need to be ourselves. We need to be who we are. We are the north of Superior Shield area of this province. We still have great forests. We have mining potential. We have hydroelectric power in abundance. We can be so you know. Suzuki said years ago, he said, if you somehow severed Canada from the rest of North America and the planet and set it adrift, it would be just fine. And I say the same about Northwestern Ontario. I'm probably one of these radicals that would like us to be our own province and maybe, you know, associate us with Manitoba, because we really are a different entity. We really are a different entity up here, and I want to talk about that identity. I see no separation between myself and the sometimes vilified government out there, mysteriously. Now that I've gotten into the game, I have a deeper appreciation for my colleagues here on the panel.
Thank you. And Anthony Leblanc.
Thank you. Like my friend Scott, I like to refer to myself as an amateur politician who's trying to turn pro. This is my first time running, and I look at Michael and I'm in somewhat awe that he's been able to go through these processes for as long as he has. It's interesting to get together with groups like this, and by the way, you should all feel very proud that this is the first forum where all four of us have been on the same stage together. And I'll be the first one to fall on my sword. I missed the first one for no good reason, and Michael, of course, has had some. I won't even get into it, but Michael has been absent for good reason, is what I wanted to say. But we're all here, and that's important. It shows that this is a topic we all need to have a serious discussion about. And when I say that, the reality is there's so many intertwining aspects. And one thing that I've realized, I'm the first to throw up my hand and say if I don't know something. If this was a technology forum, you want to talk about the future of wireless data, I think I'd be your man to say I'm an expert. Or hockey teams, I'm pretty good at that stuff too. But this is a topic that I am the first to say I am a novice and I'm researching. And one thing that I've realized as I've become more in tune with this process as I do a lot of research is there's a lot of conflicting ideas out there. And that's somewhat discouraging. There was a great column that is it Julie or Julie? But oh, did you? Sorry to point you out. But I thought it was a very succinct, very important, questioning article of what we do next. And it makes you research. And as you research, you'll see one expert at Stanford say one thing, and another expert at MIT say the complete contradictory thing. And Michael was talking about the wind farms in Dorian, but didn't bring up the wind farms just down the road. And I realize it's not an hour riding, and that's fair. But the reality is the Nor'Wester Escarpment has brought up a whole other host of issues about what are the environmental impacts, what are the economic impacts. The reality is we do need to explore and invest in green energy, but we have to do it in a way that is sustainable. And I don't mean just sustainable environmentally, I mean sustainable economically. And sustainable to all of us from a health standpoint for not just human beings but for wildlife. And right now, I think that there's a heck of a lot more questions than answers, and I think that's why we're all here today. I know you're looking for us as either aspiring politicians or professional politicians to tell you what our thoughts are, and I'm sure we all will. I'm happy to share what my thoughts are and what the platform of the PC Party of Ontario is and what Tim Hudak, our leader, feels about this. 20 seconds? Okay, I've done a very good job of filling in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, saying not a whole hell of a lot. But again, I'm here to have a discussion with you and understand where you come from, but at the same time provide what feedback we feel is pertinent. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you to you all. So we do have some questions that are provided from participants who have been here today and yesterday at our forum. And I'd like to begin with this one. And if you want to answer them in the reverse order this time, then that would be great. So starting on the end with Anthony. The question is, scientists generally agree that carbon-based economies like ours are driving up global temperatures and threatening life on Earth. If elected, how will your party ensure that we Ontarians do our fair share to reduce greenhouse gases and help stabilize the world's climate?
All right. So one of the first things that we have said as a PC party is we are committed to shutting down all coal-powered plants in Ontario by 2016. We feel that's an important thing that needs to happen. It's also been promised by Michael and his party, and it's slipped a number of times. We feel that has to happen. But to get back to my point that I just made when I just finished speaking and thought I'd have about a 10-minute break, the reality is there are conflicting stories out there. In fact, I was just reading this morning a report from 2009 that was put out by that small little institute called the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in a program that they had. And it talked about in one of their conclusions, it talked about the negative effect or the possible negative effect of industrial wind farms on climate change. And it's one of those things that make you realize that while this is an important discussion to move forward and discuss and invest in green energy in areas such as wind turbines, you also realize that it is not 100% solid, that it doesn't have any adverse effects on climate change. In fact, the study indicated that by 2100, the reality is wind turbines have the potential of increasing the overall temperatures on the planet by 1 degree. I bet you're all shocked that a PC candidate just brought up that figure. I'm a little surprised myself. But that is the reality, that we don't know. And we have to have a stronger discussion. And I bring up the wind turbines over on the Nor'Wester Escarpment. It's the same thing. We've heard discussion about what is the effect on the peregrine falcon. Well, we need to understand what the effect is going to be on all wildlife and health before we make a final decision to move forward with that. I'm done.
Green wireless data?
Absolutely. How much have you reduced printing things since you started using a BlackBerry?
No, I was just asking a question. And green hockey too. All right. I've called my own campaign another inconvenient truth. Yes, the whole global warming thing, and there are conflicting scientific facts and figures running around. The whole thing about conflict being, whether it's in the public arena, here perhaps today on this panel and within the audience perhaps, or in the scientific area, is that conflict is what we as human beings are kind of, we sort of specialize in that, if you haven't noticed. But on the positive side, I believe that conflict, if there's conflict around and conflicting things, it's, that's the building of democracy right there. The global warming issue is, excuse me, is central to all of this. We're aware of greenhouse gas. You know, we're creating a kind of a built-up particulate layer, just a little ways off the Earth, and the sun's radiation is able to go through that, and of course radiate back as it heats up the Earth, and then it gets trapped. So we've got this conundrum that we've got, that we are heating up the planet. I believe that it's going to happen to a greater or lesser extent. Now, some people have said that the final domino is tipping, and because of our present population density, that there's not a lot that we can do. There are many things that we can do, and this panel here, or this conference here today, is an example of people that are concerned about it. Okay, there's a whole matrix of things within the Green Party platform to get our grid fitted and micro-fitted on a local basis, and have local consultation and decisions about how we use energy and our consumptive patterns. Small businesses and farms would be rewarded and awarded according to their sustainable and renewable practices that they are instituting within their little businesses.
Go ahead,
Thank you. Well, we are the party, and we are the government that made the decision and is acting upon the decision to close down coal-fired generation in the province of Ontario, and there have been challenges in terms of the time frame. Having said that, we are on target to have them closed, them all closed down in a number of years. And as those of you in this room would know, those from northwestern Ontario, that was not without also some political challenges, and it feeds into this discussion today quite interestingly about how you can green the economy, how we can fight obviously climate change and global warming, while at the same time maintaining an opportunity for economic development. And we've done that, of course, in terms of the Atikokan generating station by transferring that to biomass, and may I say, maintaining jobs and creating some jobs as well through our wood supply allocation, but also doing the same thing with the Thunder Bay generating station. So that's a commitment that means a great deal. We think it's very important, and it's one that we're very proud of. We also are supportive of the cap and trade system. We are basically committed to seeing the GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions reduced by 6% below 1990 levels by 2014, and by 15% by 2020. There's no question, in the context of this discussion, I think it's very important. One, I believe we all support this decision, but indeed it also opens up the discussion as to how, when one makes the right decision about climate change, I think maybe that's why, one of the reasons why David Suzuki has come out publicly in favor of certainly our green energy policies and supporting our government's actions in that regard. How we can also work together to make the people understand that you can also have a very green economy that develops as a result of some of those decisions. But we're proud of that decision, difficult as it was potentially politically, and I believe that Northerners support a clean environment, and I believe that we can move forward in that regard together.
Thank you.
I have no doubt that we're facing a real challenge in terms of our environment. I know when I first built my little house there in 1970, every winter we'd have 3 weeks of 40 below. We haven't seen 40 below in our community for probably 10, 15 years. The climate has changed, and anyone that pays attention knows that. I think in terms of the carbon footprint, we need to work together to make the change. If you count on electing one of us to make the change, I'm sorry, you're going to be disappointed. There's tremendous interests at work that want to maintain that carbon-based economy, and and we can look at Alberta or any of the oil-producing areas. That's our opposition. They don't want that to happen. That's their profit. We have to reach out. We have to get more people involved, and there's concrete things we can do in the meantime while we do that political stuff. I think energy conservation is number one. Let's reduce the amount of energy we need. And you can look at that in a number of different ways, certainly in terms of our home and home heating. I was just up in the region, I was at Pays Plat, and they got big government grants to build a big arena and gymnasium. Well, they've run out of money, and there's no insulation, and there's no plans for insulating the building. So it's like, how are we planning our government funds to ensure that we're using less energy? That has to be a component of all of the programs that we have with our government. Public transportation is a key, right? I mean, the cars and trucks that we drive are a big component. You know, I go to Toronto, public transit is number one. And of course, what do we have here? We have the company that's making the cars there, Green Energy. I live out in the country. Every time I drive to town, I feel guilty. Oh my God, this is the worst thing I'm doing for the planet. I'm driving. How about community transit? How about, you know, some of the bright young people who know all about the BlackBerry and stuff set up a system for us so we can share rides. We can cut our own personal costs and we can cut emissions. I think we ourselves can make real change if we dedicate ourselves to it, put our minds to it, and work together. Thank you.
Thank you all. The next question. Recently, with the downturn in the forest industry, we've seen communities that have been built entirely around this one single industry really struggle. How would you help to ensure that our northern communities are more resilient to the booms and busts of our major natural resource industries? And if you don't mind answering in the following order, Scott first, then Michael, Steve, and then Anthony.
Thank you. Well, in the last election, the federal election, there was a lot of stuff about, a lot of dialogue rather about mill closures and people not being paid out properly in this community. So, you know, we're not going to really open that can of worms again. But suffice it to say that, you know, we know very well in this community what a one-horse town as far as industry, what things can result out of that. And we don't need to repeat those patterns. I'm always of the sort of slant that there's no shortage of resources. There tends to be a little bit of a shortage of money within households and families and people that are struggling to get set up with things. But okay, how do we look forward to preserving what little we have of our industry left? My advisor here, Lynn Palmer, today, she's working on her PhD in the area of community forestry, and she's been trying to keep me kind of well-schooled in this area. And so this is where I'd like to focus my answer. It's on what we call the community forestry model. And it's going to sound radical to some people, but it just seems to make such good common sense to me that the community and the actual stakeholders, right from the community members themselves up to other business partners, can have an actual stake in the profits and in the management, not just the profits, but the management of the forest. And the community forestry model as well is fairly enlightened in that it doesn't just see standing timber as standing dollar signs, which is, let's face it, folks, you know, I used to, you know, when you'd smell the mill, my parents would say, "That's the smell of prosperity, son." Well, I'd kind of like some cleaner air, and I'd like more people participating in how we manage the entire forest. You know, you can cut down, you can regrow trees, but you cannot regrow a forest.
Well, let me begin, if I may. I mean, God, we need a lot of time for these kinds of discussions, but by giving some credit to the forestry sector for recognize how important it is to transform the way that they do business, which is why we're seeing so much, we're providing so much support for biomass cogeneration projects, and also why we're seeing in some of the smaller communities some very, very interesting projects that are actually based on a clean, green biomass level opportunities for the communities. That goes for Marathon, may I say, for Red Rock. We haven't been able to complete all those projects. There's lots of reasons why it's been taking longer than we wanted to. But the long and the short is, you look at a company like Abitibi-Bowater here in Thunder Bay. One, they've made a very strong commitment to the community. This is an asset that could have could have left this community, but they made a commitment to the community, and they are building, investing in a condensing turbine and investing in a cogeneration project that will, one, stabilize their costs, along with the industrial energy rate we've been able to provide them, and also to be able to expand their operations. There are some amazing opportunities. Most people don't realize when one looks at the forestry industry now, about half of it really is coming from value-added products. So there is a transformation of the industry. The reality is it's going to be challenging to see our industry come back to the way it was. That's where the discussion talks about realities such as the housing crisis in the United States, issues related to the dollar, and may I say some of the costs that are associated with their operations. But the fact is that the forest industry is transforming itself. That's why they've been so supportive of our Center for Research and Innovation in the Bioeconomy. They see opportunities, and we're working with Abitibi Boulevard again on a pilot project in that regard. They see that there's a great opportunities. That's why we're also committed to a bioeconomy fund if we are re-elected as the government. So the transforming the industry has been a painful one. We've seen what happened with the global recession, but the long and the short is, I'll stop, Peter, is that the transformation of the industry is one where, again, ties into this discussion about opportunities that we see for a greener economy.
So we do need a time machine so I can stretch my 2 minutes here. You know, I have to start with what I've seen already. I was up in Nikina, and with much hoofah, a new mill started up there about a dozen years ago, or 14 years ago. State-of-the-art, best thing around. It was a small community. People moved there from all over to work in those jobs. They built new homes. They built their future. 10 years later, it's closed. All those people have lost all their investments, and they're pretty bitter. I go, is that the way to plan economic development? One would say, geez, we have big steps to go. We need to really engage people in saying, what is sustainable development? Our model around here has been, geez, a big international company or a big forest giant like Buchanan says, oh, I'm going to get a bunch of jobs, and everybody says, woohoo, all right, we got jobs, and with no real thought about how long those jobs will be here, what the impact will be on the environment. And we need to say, wait. Yeah, we want jobs, but we want jobs that support our community, our families, and our environment. Definitely we need to spend more time on diversity. I was up in Long Lac. Every third house in Long Lac is for sale because their forest industry has crumbled. And yet, here's they're opening up the gold mines in Geraldton just 15 minutes down the road. And there's a company who wants to start up to make timbers to restructure the mines in Geraldton, right? We're going to cut down on transportation costs, we're going to keep it local. They can't get the rights to the wood so that they can start up a little business to create products that are needed in the local economy. How are we managing our forests that are helping our communities? This is totally crazy. And now we've moved to full use of the forest. Well, as an organic gardener, I go, okay, if you take everything out of the forest and now you burn it to create electricity, what are you doing to the soil? How long can we sustain that forest if we take all of the things that have actually built the soil to grow the trees in the first place? Are we really doing the right thing? We really need to have engagement on these issues and talk about them so that we're making the right choices for the future, for our kids, our grandkids, and the future generations.
The question's kind of broad and specific. I'm going to talk probably my 2 minutes exhausted talking the specific with the example of forestry, but I'll open by saying that the broader reality is we need better economic development initiatives, and we need people that understand economic development in the private sector, something of course I feel pretty strongly about. The wood allocation system in this province is flawed. It is broken, and that is why we've seen 60 mills close in the last 8 years and tens of thousands of jobs in northwestern Ontario lost. It's as simple as that. It is not transparent. It is not. It's not easy to understand. And quite frankly, we are the only party that has put out there that we feel strongly that there is 26 million cubic meters of wood that is available to be harvested in this province every year. That is, the wood is not getting out there right now. And right now, I think it's closer to 11 million cubic meters of wood has been allocated this year. We feel very strongly, and again, I'm talking specifically to the question using a reference of forestry. I agree with, I think Michael said that it's going to be difficult to get our forestry sector back to where it was. I agree with that. I don't think that forestry will ever get back to where it was, but it can certainly be a lot stronger than it is today. It needs assistance from its government to ensure that the wood is being put to work. And that is something that Tim Hudak stated when he was here yesterday debating Andrea Horvath about northern issues. Bless you. About northern issues, that we need a stronger wood allocation system, one that is enforced, and one that is put together with the best interests of Northern Ontario. So that is, again, specifically to forestry, we can do a much better job. Towns like Marathon, towns like Long Lac have mills that are ready to go back to work if they only had the wood available to them. But again, back to a broader standpoint about economic development, we need Tim Hudak likes to talk about the fact that he is, if he's elected, he will be the best friend that small business ever had. And that's what we need now. The reality is small business is the heart and soul of our economy in Ontario. We need it to be easier for our small business operators to operate and not be overregulated. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. So if we could go in the following order, Michael, Steve, Anthony, and then Scott. So the question is, how will your party ensure strong northern economies and protect habitat of threatened species like woodland caribou?
Well, I also wish I had a chance to rebut what Steve went after me and then Anthony. I'm sure that we'll have that opportunity in further debates, gentlemen, and Scott as well.
So you and I are still friends, then?
I love you all. I do. I'm really
Yes.
Listen, we obviously have brought forward an Endangered Species Act legislation. We are very, very keen to be sure that indeed we can find a balance between protection of our habitat, which is important, and also finding the opportunities for economic growth and economic renewal in the province of Ontario, and particularly, obviously, for our purposes in Northern Ontario. And we believe that we can achieve that balance. And again, when we look at the wood allocation policy, if I may just refer to that a bit, we have been able to basically put about 3,000 people, either have them keep their jobs or basically put them back to work on projects that are, many of them relate to this discussion. I made the reference to the Rentec proposal. That's a good story that is having a positive impact on directly on White River, also on a number of First Nations who have an interest in this. We haven't had an opportunity to speak about those opportunities as well. Certainly in terms of the endangered species, there's been reference to it in a peripheral way today, and we recognize that there are challenges. We are committed to seeing basically a sustainable northern economy, and we put in place a number of measures to make sure that happens. And when we talk about some of the other opportunities that are there, I made reference to Long Lac and Greenstone in particular, one we're working on very, very closely with the community. And the fact is that we want to continue to make sure that happens. So in terms of the endangered species, in terms of other issues related to that, the challenge is, and I don't think anybody would argue that, is to be able to find a balance of seeking that protection, at the same time seeing our northern economy not just be sustained, but grow. And indeed, the opportunities are there, and I could give you example upon example of that, of how we've been able to meet that goal.
Thank you, Steve.
I think, once again, we need to look at the long term here. There is changes right now in terms of our natural environment. In my area, the moose are almost all gone, and deer have replaced them. We now have raccoons in our area and ticks that we never had. These aren't based on short-term policies. These are based on climate change. As the climate changes, the environment changes, and animals and bugs and change as well. So when we look at a little piece, if we say, okay, we're going to now protect this little piece of bush for the caribou, I think we're kind of fooling ourselves, because the caribou are going to go where the climate allows them to go or not go. We think we can manage things in the short term in this political process of, you know, the next couple years, the next term in office, and we're fooling ourselves. We need to say, what is going to be sustainable in our area? And it's the big picture. We need to reduce the impact of carbon in our environment. We need to look at how we live on the planet and make choices that say, this is sustainable or not. We have tough choices ahead of us. There's no doubt about it. And we live in a wonderful country that's very wealthy, and we use a tremendous amount of resources in our normal life without ever thinking about it. These are some of the challenges that we're going to be facing on an individual level and on a societal level, that if we really want to protect our endangered species, we're going to have to face these right up front.
The question was to do with the economy of the North. And one of the things that we have been very strong about, and Tim again made this statement quite clearly yesterday when he was here, we need Northern policy dictated and put together by Northerners. That's number one. It's most important to us. We do not need Southern Ontario special interest groups telling us how we should be operating here in Northern Ontario. And unfortunately, the Far North Act is an example of legislation that has been put together due to special interest groups in Southern Ontario. We have indicated very strongly we will repeal the Far North Act. This is something that's been asked for by First Nations groups, the majority of chambers of commerce, and we will make sure that that is taken care of, as I believe Steve's party has indicated they will do as well, repeal the Far North Act. We do not feel that it's appropriate to rope off half of Northern Ontario, put a big rope, as I said, put a rope around it, say you can look at it, but you can't touch it. Now, the Endangered Species Act is another example of overreaching in this regard. We have heard from a number of farmers as well as property owners that are very concerned that their rights are being infringed upon because of this Endangered Species Act. We have been very clear that we have an issue with that. But in Northern Ontario, the biggest issue we have with the future growth of our economy is the Far North Act, and that's why we have stated we will repeal that.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, gentlemen. How do we preserve our northern economy while sort of transitioning into the whole green thing, green grid, sustainable, renewable? I want to talk a little bit about a couple of terms, sustainable and renewable. We know that the trees are renewable. I said before, we can cut those down and we can grow more trees. So we can do that. That's a crop. And in fact, foresters really disturb me when they talk about trees as a crop, like it's corn. But it's the practice and the thinking that cuts them down at such a rate and such a vast area at one time. The present clear cutting process. It's the thinking itself that isn't sustainable. And the lesson that we're on the cusp of learning here as the human family, whether it be Thunder Bay or globally, is that, of course, all things are connected, and I'm sure that you're aware of that, but we don't actually, the thing is, we're aware of it, we're intelligent, people are very intelligent, and we're aware of these things, but we don't practice. We don't translate that kind of awareness that we're all connected into a practice that's going to matter. The Greens would bring in a green tax cut. So on the one hand, they would impose larger taxes on the big boys who are offending the environment, frankly, to be frank about it, who are offending the environment, who are poisoning our waters, our land, our air. They would be taxed stronger. And those that are practicing sustainable practices, like recycling in the office or whatever it might be, getting rid of the photocopier machine, many things that can happen that perpetuate the elimination of our forest, you would be rewarded, you would be subsidized, and your taxes would be cut appropriately on the small business level for sure. And it'll affect both ends. We very much support a carbon tax, the Greens.
Okay, thank you very much. Our candidates do have other events to attend and pressing things to do. So thank you very much for being so concise with your answers to some very, very complex questions. And best of luck. Thank you for coming.